Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you in the back who want to grab a seat, now is a good time to do that. I'll try and adjust this microphone so it doesn't sound quite so scary. Maybe like that. Can folks hear me still? Yeah. General nodding of heads? Okay, great. Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's wonderful to be meeting in person here for the first time since 2020. Yeah. I can't see everybody in the back row there, but I assume this year everybody's wearing pants. It's great to be in person and have a chance to be together again. My name is Chuck Wooster. I'm your town and school district moderator. I was elected at last year's town meeting to run this year's meeting on your behalf. Tonight is the first of 3 meetings in this year's town meeting cycle. This is Budget and Candidates Night. We'll be hearing presentations from the Selectboard, the school board, and candidates for office, and we'll have a chance to ask them questions and make comments. The second meeting is Town and School District Meeting Day, which will be held this Saturday. That starts at 10 o'clock. That's here in the gymnasium here at the high school. And this year, as we have in the past, we'll have what we call coffee with committees starting at 9 o'clock, which is a wonderful chance if you have a chance to come early and mingle with some of your fellow townspeople who are on our various volunteer committees in town. So that starts at 9 o'clock. The meeting starts at 10. At the meeting on Saturday, we'll be voting on the formal warnings that can be found in your annual report. That's this book here. I imagine everybody here has one of these, or at least knows what it is, and I'd encourage you to grab one if you don't have it, since much of what we're talking about and voting on is in this. And in the front are the warnings for Saturday's meetings. And then the final meeting, the third meeting, is of course all-day voting. That's a week from tomorrow, town meeting day. So those are the 3 parts of town meeting this year. There's a fair bit of overlap between these 3 meetings, so I want to clarify under state statute what's allowed to happen when. So tonight, as I said, we're discussing budgets and candidates, but we're not voting on them. All the voting happens a week from tomorrow on town meeting day. Rather, our purpose tonight is to ask questions, clarify details, help you decide how you want to vote, perhaps influence others on how they might want to vote. So in other words, tonight we talk and next week we vote. Next week you can't talk unless you get a note from Lisa, the town clerk. And then Saturday's meeting, the agenda is pretty brief. There's only 3 items on each of the warnings. And that's in accordance with state statute. It's sort of housekeeping things that we need to do as a town to keep things running smoothly. Having said that, you will notice that the number 1 item on each of the agendas is to receive this report from the town officers. And since this booklet includes the budgets of the town and the school, that means talking about the budgets on Saturday is fair game. And so if we don't get to everybody's questions and comments about the budgets tonight, we can do that again on Saturday. So, so not to worry, you can sharpen your pencils and come back again. The only thing we won't talk about on Saturday is the candidates. So tonight is your only shot at the candidates. And that's because under state statute, the Saturday and Tuesday meetings are considered 2 halves of the same whole, and candidates aren't required to face the double jeopardy of kind of being in front of the voters twice. So if you want to ask a question, tonight's the time to do it, and then next week is the chance to vote. Okay, as we get started, I want to take a special moment to thank our Town and School District Meeting Committee. This is a group of 5 who has been designing posters, laying out floor plans, contacting candidates, setting up tonight's meeting, and generally being great ambassadors around town meeting. We've been really lucky to have 5 active and enthusiastic volunteers who are doing that, and I believe all 5 of you are here this evening. Could you stand up quickly if you're in the room? Okay, good, they're down back, yeah. Susan Manley, Ryan Selsa, Nikki Boyle, Emily Santon, and Adam Ricker are those 5. And as I said, they've done a great job this year as we get ready to meet in person again for the first time in a while. Our town is blessed with dozens and dozens of volunteers who do everything from working the polls to coaching sporting events to grappling with issues like climate change and social justice. If you've been thinking you might want to get more involved in the town or the school as a volunteer, I'd encourage you again to take a look in the report here, which will give you a great idea of who's doing what and ways to get involved. We have, of course, a pretty big town, a lot of town employees, but we have an even larger number of volunteers that are essential to keeping our town running. So I want to shout out to them as well. And again, you can come at 9 o'clock on Saturday to meet some of those folks. Finally, a big thanks to each of you just for showing up. Democracy is more than just voting. It's the process of self-government. It's about building and maintaining community, making informed decisions about what's best, both today and for the future. And that's what tonight's meeting is all about. So thank you for coming. Okay, on to the matter at hand. Tonight's meeting will have 4 parts. We'll hear from the town about the budget. We'll hear from the school about the budget. We'll hear from each of the candidates for local office, and then we'll have a question and answer period. My hope is that we'll have a chance as part of the school and town budget presentations to also ask some questions, but that it's going to be a 30-minute window. So if we don't get to questions fully in that period, then budget questions are also part of the 4th part of the meeting here. So it isn't just candidates at the end. Feel free to ask budgetary questions, and we'll make sure our presenters and board members stick around to be able to answer those questions. Okay, the final item of housekeeping for tonight is you must be a registered voter in the town of Hartford to speak at tonight's meeting. This is state statute, and this is part of our annual town meeting. When you approach the microphone, I'll ask you to state your name and where you live, and you should feel free to give your street address or your village or the town of Hartford or whatever you'd like to do. There's one exception to this that I want to propose for tonight's meeting. I'm going to ask you for your permission to do this, which is the following. If there's any employee of the town or school district who does not reside in Hartford, yet wishes to respond with relevant information to a voter's question, I would suggest that they be allowed to do so, and this will allow our meeting to flow more smoothly. Is there any objection from anybody here tonight to allowing a town or school employee with relevant information to participate in that way? Okay, hearing none, I will adopt that by unanimous consent, and when we have a town or school employee, I'll ask them just to identify where they live, and so we know who they are. Okay, that's the general outlook for tonight. We're going to start off with the presentation of the town budget, and we have the chair of the select board and the acting town manager to do so. This will be a 25-minute period. They're going to start off with a presentation. I hope we'll have a chance for some Q&A, and as I said, if we don't get to all questions, then we'll resume later in the meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gail and Mike.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Is this on? Okay. Thanks, Chuck. Welcome, everyone. As Chuck mentioned, I'm Mike Hoyt. I'm chair of the select board. I am here with our acting town manager and finance director, Gail Ostrout. And we're going to walk you through the town budget. The budget is the result of a lot of hard work between Gail, between the department heads and all the town staff, as well as the select board. And I think Gail wanted to introduce some of the town department heads who are in attendance this evening.
Chris Hallsworth is here, if you can raise your hand, Chris. He's representing Public Works. Dylan Walsh is our information technology. I believe everyone knows Lisa O'Neill. Lori Horschfield, she's the Director of Planning and Development. Scott Hausler, Director of Parks and Rec. We get Big Lieutenant Tom Howell from the Police Department. And our other friendly public safety person, Jason Azora. He is our deputy chief.
Okay, thank you, Gail, and thank you, everyone, for your hard work for the town. All right, so we've got a PowerPoint presentation. We're going to walk you through this year's budget, talk about what's in it, the increase in the budget, the reason for it, and we're going to go through the ARPA funding as well, so you get a sense of the kind of infrastructure investments that we've made for you to review this year. Okay, so here's the background of the general fund. So our current fiscal year general fund, FY23, That was a general fund budget of $18,478,171, and that goes through June 30th. And so that number includes all the service organization appropriations, which were $224,177. So the service organization appropriations, those are the ones you see on the ballot that require essentially a special line item. You see advanced transit, other organizations like that. So our budget this year, our proposed FY24 budget, is an increase. It's proposed at $19,244,123. So this represents an increase over last year's budget of 4.1%, or if you want the monetary amount, $765,951. So I know in the past we've tried to keep our increases below that, within 3. But, 4.1, I think as you look at the overall budget, is actually fairly impressive. We're in a year of year-to-year inflation of 6 to 7%. And I think you'll also see, we'll explain, there really are some inflationary pressures on town government, particularly when it comes to things like insurance, health insurance for all town staff went up by 21% this year. So 4 is what we're, a little bit more than we normally would do, but we feel like, we did put a thoughtful effort in to keep it as low as possible, particularly in the kind of inflation that we're seeing. So that number, the $19,244,000, that will include all service organization appropriations. I know that they're not voted on until town meeting day, but we do factor that in when we're expressing to you the increase in the budget. So our projected non-tax revenues, those increased by 7.4%, or $198,943. So in FY23, in our non-tax revenues, we had $2,698,633, plus the reappropriation of $1 million in the unassigned fund balance. So this year's budget, our proposed non-tax revenues are up by 7%, $2,897,575.62, plus the appropriation of $1 million in the unassigned fund balance. So I believe these proposed non-tax revenues come from a variety of sources, like the local option tax, things like that.
No, they come from communications, they come from Parks and Recreation, they come from the town clerk, they come from planning.
Okay,
Services.
so all the funds that aren't expended in the prior budget or in this current budget? No? Yep. Okay.
No, so non-tax revenue is revenue that's generated throughout the year. If somebody comes in and gets a parks permit, they come in and do recording. The fire department also has service revenue that they generate from ambulance calls, and the police department, communications, we have contracts with other communities where we provide service to them, and they provide us a fee.
Okay, thank you, Gail. So the current draft budget, we have to raise $15,346,547.08 to be raised by taxes. And that also includes the $243,000 of the service organization appropriations. So that's sort of what it looks like overall, the amount of the increase in the budget compared to last year. Is there anything else we want to add on that, Gail?
Did you talk about?
And that assumes a 0.03 growth in the grand list. So you can see the numbers there, the increase in the grand list from $1,411,532 to $1,412,000,000. All right, so we have the recent tax rate history going back to FY 2019, and you can see the tax rate changes over those years. In 21, 22, and 23, we had fairly lean budgets because of COVID, essentially, trying to keep the tax increase to a minimum. This year, as we mentioned, we do have a larger increase than we've seen in the past, and that's 3.98 cents, and that's for every $100 value, I believe, on the value of the home. Is that correct? So it looks like if you have a $250,000 home, your tax is going to go up $99, roughly 75 cents. So it is a bit more than it has been, and we're trying to, we think that's pretty good given the amount of inflation that we've had. So that's the tax rate history. So in this budget, we use other revenue sources than just the property tax, right? So one is the local option tax. This year, we're choosing to fund the libraries with the local option tax. It's a total amount of $332,710. So the local option tax, of course, is a tax that Hartford has elected to assess on rooms, meals, and sales of alcoholic beverages. And so under our charter, of course, to expend the local option tax, it needs to get approval by the voters. So what you'll see in this year's ballot, what's different from prior ones when it comes to library funding, is that the library funding is a separate line item. It's Article 21 on the ballot. So that will need to be voted on separately because we're proposing to use the local option tax to fund the libraries. In the past, we've used the local option tax for things like the cemetery funding, purchasing equipment, things like that. This year, we wanted to put the libraries in for the local option tax, and we know when that got out, there were a lot of people who were anxious about it. People look, at the Vermont State Colleges proposing to digitize all their libraries, other things like that, nationally involving, censorship of books. And I think people got anxious that this, meant in some way that the select board devalued our libraries, and we don't. We support them very strongly. And we're Hartford, we fund our libraries, so I expect that this will pass. By using the local option tax instead of property tax revenues, it does lessen the increase of the budget. So that's why the libraries are on there. We expect that they'll pass, handily, and we ask that you all support using the local option tax to fund the libraries. We also have an unassigned fund balance of $1 million. So if you look at the items that covers, a lot of it is reserve funding. There are a couple things. So some of that goes for the town match of grants. So oftentimes we'll get grants where the state's going to give us money for a project, and we have to match part of it, right? And you have like a 10-to-1 match, or you have something like that. So what we're doing here is using the unassigned fund to fund the town matching. The rest, like I said, are generally reserves. There's WABA, the playground reserve, the fire and ambulance reserve, highway equipment reserve, pool reserve, the WRJ revitalization reserve, conservation reserve, and then there's curbside recycling, of course, which we still have to pay for this year. I believe, our contract with Casella is coming up in a year or so, so that's something that will be put before the voters again. We have an engineering reserve, police reserve, communications reserve, and our IT reserve. So when it comes to the unassigned fund balance, that's where that's going, mainly, predominantly to the reserve fundings for these various entities. All right, and then we have ARPA, right? So ARPA, of course, is the American Rescue Plan Act. Those are the funds that came directly to Hartford. And as you can see, as of the end of last year, we had $2.8 million roughly in reserve for ARPA. So ARPA funds, they have to be expended, or they have to be pledged essentially by the end of '24, and then expended by the end of 2026, I believe.
23.
23?
They have to be pledged by 23 and expended by 24.
Okay. 23 and then 24. So this is what we decided to do with the funding projects. So not only do we have our regular budget, we have the ARPA funds, which are basically investments in the town's infrastructure. And here's what we're spending it for. We don't spend all the ARPA funds, but we do spend a fairly significant amount. So you can see for Parks and Rec, we're spending on two items, $80,000 for a skid steer, and then $72,000 for two mowers. And these mowers are both, I believe, electric mowers. So that's good, trying to meet some of our climate goals by using our funds for electric mowers. The police, we're expending $75,000 for one cruiser and then fit up so it's operational in the town. For the public safety building, $40,000 for a camera system. So right now, public safety has like 2 camera systems that are needed to sort of cover the entire building. Neither system is continued to be supported by the vendor, right? So basically, they're going to need, they're asking for, and we put this before you, $40,000 for a camera system that'll cover the public safety building. There's $56,368.30 for a training system for the police. And this is a virtual training system. It's actually very interesting. It's sort of customizable and programmable. So police can train for certain situations, someone who's in distress, things like that, and it gives them the opportunity to sort of practice a response. So that's, I think that's very interesting. The fire department, $450,000. That's to refurbish the 2006 E1 fire engine. We heard from the fire chief that by refurbishing this particular fire engine will increase its useful life by 10 years. By choosing to refurbish it instead of buying a new engine, that's a savings of about $450,000. The next item for planning is $233,000 for parking meters. The thinking here is that we have a serious parking problem in downtown White River, and that by investing in parking meters, that will help speed the traffic along, move it along, so people just don't park, downtown all day if they're working at a job or something, or if they live downtown. So the parking meters, they're in there. There's $80,000 for a Bugby Senior Center building assessment. And this assessment will sort of tell us what we need to make the building more accessible for the seniors who enjoy it. Then we've got a number of rather large public works projects. So $400,000 for the Hartford water main replacement. That's Gate Street Hill and Fairview Terrace. $400,000 for the Queechee water main replacement, which runs along Main Street. $225,000 for the Queechee box culvert. And then there is one more on the next page I'll just quickly note. $300,000 for the Hartford water main replacement, Nut Lane, Harrison Avenue, and Latham Works. So Public Works identified all of these projects as very high priority, almost, essentially shovel ready, dealing with aging infrastructure, and also there can be public safety concerns with some of these projects. So we've decided to fund these with ARPA. By funding the four of them with ARPA, it allows DPW to increase its paving budget from $500,000 to $775,000. So we think that's a real win, identifying these programs that are already, ready to go, and it also allows an increase in the paving budget. $50,000 for Public Works for bridge maintenance and capital assessment. So the Public Works can, identify issues with our bridges and decide what we need to do to keep them functioning properly. There's $100,000 invested in essentially a capital assessment of our solid waste facility, the transfer station, to see what we want to do with it going forward, essentially. So I mentioned the $300,000 for the Hartford water main replacement. There are a couple other projects. So $8,500 is for the West Hartford Bridge striping. And then there's associated a $36,000 investment in the West Hartford Route 14, sort of bike pedestrian improvements. That area is very popular with people who want to access the river. It's also where the Appalachian Trail comes out, so there can be a lot of pedestrian traffic, lots of bike traffic, because it's a very nice area to cycle in. So what this would do would help, sort of, build up the shoulder, get sort of some more area for bikes, pedestrians to walk, and just generally improve safety in that way, because it is an area where people can tend to speed. So our total board-approved projects that we're going to put before you for ARPA spending, that's $2,605,863.30. That is not all of our balance. We have $260,279 balance after those projects if they are approved. We've also earmarked, and pending further review, is the possible creation of a housing development reserve, which would find ways to sort of use money to identify programs that could help increase affordable housing in Hartford. That has not, been signed off on yet. We're waiting to see how that plan develops before we commit totally to that. So those are the ARPA projects. Anything you'd like to add, Gail, on those?
Yeah, I just would like to make one point of clarification. The projects that were just listed, with the exception of the housing development review, those projects were approved by the board back in January, so there's not an approval that we're waiting on from anybody else. We have began executing them. So I just want to make sure that there was.
So we've got the ARPA projects. So we've shown you those. Here's the sort of the funding obligations. These are the things that the town has to pay for. So of course, the personnel costs, the salaries, overtime, FICA, which is the Social Security tax, workers' comp, and then retirement. And then there's the healthcare. So MVP, dental, HRA, life insurance, the AD&D, and the retiree healthcare. And I think we mentioned, some of these are really, going up quite a bit. There's a lot of inflationary pressure. So the health insurance going up by 21%, dental's gone up by 4%. Our property and liability insurance has gone up by 24%. So there are a lot of pressures on the budget due to inflation. There are other things, operating costs, telephones, property and liability I mentioned, the West Hartford Library, debt service, county taxes, senior services, the restricted appropriations, and then fuel. A lot of these costs, also, fuel, all types of fuel, utilities, licenses, and contracts. So there's a lot of, increased inflationary spending there as well on things like fuel, costs for materials, things like that. But now we'll tell you what this budget will buy. So we're going to include in it the IT systems, a security upgrade for our IT, another police replacement vehicle, so one by ARPA, one in the budget funding, a community safety review. So this is essentially a request for a proposal from a consultant to come and reach out to Hartford residents, hold hearings, do surveys, and really identify what issues are on people's minds in Hartford and what would make them feel safer within Hartford. So I think that'll be very interesting. This covers our lease payments, all of our long-term debt payments, our police wellness program, which is a new program, a communications officer. We want to do a better job sort of communicating to the town, letting them know when there's issues of interest, responding to people when they make inquiries, things like that, improving our website, of course. And so those are all things that we hope this will help with. The budget repairs and maintains all of our town equipment and assets. It also upgrades our municipal fire alarm monitoring system. So I believe that's like in any sort of public building you have where there's like one of the fire alarm poles. That'll help maintain that. Independent auditor services, the town's required to be audited on a yearly basis. So that helps pay for that. The town match for existing grants, like I said, for a lot of projects, the state will give us money if we match a certain percentage. Computer equipment to be replaced, sand and salt for our roads, a replacement of the Prospect Street traffic light was a big one, and then the cemetery funding is included in that as well. Yes, Chuck?
Yeah, I want to make sure we have a chance to get a few questions in at
Sure,
this
of course.
section. Yeah, how are we on presentation? Ah,
We're there.
wow, it never works that well, even on Zoom.
You have excellent timing, Chuck. Thank you. So that's the presentation of the budget. And yeah, if we want to have some time, we can answer some questions.
Great, why don't we take about 10 minutes now? We'll go slightly over time here, but give people a chance to start asking questions about the budget. So once again, if you want to ask a question, come up to either microphone, tell us your name, whereabouts in town that you live, and we'll try to sort of keep everybody to about a minute here to get their question and a couple of minutes back. And as I said, this is kind of the opening, and there should be plenty of time later as well. So we'll get started.
Hi, I'm Sue Buckholz, and I live in this town. I am a little concerned about the libraries, and I want to understand it well. So the West Hartford Library stays in because the town runs that? Am I understanding that right?
Yep.
And so what happens if item 21 fails?
Item 21.
Does that mean we don't care about reading and we let it go? Or I hope we have a backup plan.
No. If item 21 were to fail, and again, I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, the select board has means that it can take to ensure funding of the libraries, whether that's looking at our unassigned fund, that may be one of the main sources we would do it. But the libraries will be funded. By voting for Article 21, we're funding them through the local option tax, and that helps decrease the tax increase within this budget. So that would happen. Now, I mentioned the unassigned fund. We have an election between now and then. I may not be on the board. It'll be a new board. So of course, they're going to have to look and see, what measures they would take. I don't want to sort of dictate for them how that might happen. But the libraries will be funded if that article fails. We hope that everyone will show their support and pass Article 21. The reason that it was moved to the lot was, trying to be mindful of the tax increase, given the budget in this year of inflation. So, if people were worried about the library funding, it will be funded even if Article 21 does not pass.
Okay, I'm glad we're on record with that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Yes, question here. Please introduce
Hi,
yourself.
Kathy Melisick, Wilder, Vermont. Oh my gosh. I know there was some discussion about whether, now that retail cannabis is permitted, whether or not the taxes from that could be considered under local option tax. I know in neighboring states, they've brought in massive, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Money from those. So I'm just curious whether.
So the way it works right now is our local option tax, we have it on rooms, meals, and sales of alcohol. We do not have the local option tax on other items that are generally subject to the sales tax. So I imagine that's because of our proximity to New Hampshire, and that's, when this was adopted in the charter, it was those things. So in order to get any cannabis revenue through the sales tax, we will have to amend the charter and add a 1% sales tax. The state doesn't allow us to distinguish between items with the 1% sales tax and then the cannabis, right? So it would be essentially adopting a 1% sales tax on all items that are subject to the regular sales tax. That is proposed right now in our charter revision, right? So the select board's looking at the revised charter, going through that. When that's placed to the voters, if they adopt the 1% tax on sales, then that would be a way to collect cannabis revenue. We're always looking at what the state's doing. They've gone from saying, we'll let the towns maybe just tax cannabis alone at 1%. They've talked about revenue sharing formulas where they send it out to municipalities that have retail cannabis. And frankly, right now it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of movement in Montpelier. So if that's something that we want to do, it would have to be approved in a charter change. So it would probably be next March if that charter is presented to the voters.
Thank you. That was my next question. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Great. Good point of clarification there. That talk about the charter discussion is not on this year's town meeting ballot. So hold that thought. Yes, left microphone here.
Jeff.
Okay. Jeff Arnold from Wilder. I have a question about salaries. I noticed that the police chief gets paid $222,000 in the budget here, but the fire chief only gets $118,000. So I was wondering why the big difference, and also a couple specific questions about say that the number of captains. I don't know how many there are, but they make $340,000. I was just wondering how many captains that would be. It'd be nice if you could put the number of positions next to those data points.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. So, Gail, do you want to handle that one?
So I can answer that for you, Jeff. And I apologize earlier, Chuck had said that if you're a town employee or a school employee and you don't live in the community, you're supposed to identify that. I don't live in Hartford, I live in St. Johnsbury. So as far as the police chief line, that actually includes the police chief and the deputy chief, and their salaries are split between the police department and the communications department. So that's probably why it looks a little bit higher, because it includes more than one position. As far as how many captains are at the fire department, is that what you asked, Jeff? Or the police department, at the fire department? I'm gonna refer over to Jason, Deputy Chief, if you could.
4 captains, I think I heard, right? Yep.
Thank you, Jason.
Great. Okay, next question.
David Briggs, White River Junction. First, a comment and a question. The comment is I was not in favor of the local option tax for a lot of obvious reasons, but yet it does my heart good to see the money going to libraries. Just a point of reference. The question has to do with the debt service. That was one of the line items that you just referenced as to where our tax dollars go. And can you recite what percentage of our total budget goes for debt service retirement?
I don't have that off the top of my head, David, I'm sorry.
Could
I
I
can
get
certainly-
that out of the town report, perhaps?
You should be able to, and also there's a presentation that was given by the Vermont Bond Bank that's very user-friendly and talks about the governmental debt, which would be under the general fund, and it also includes the enterprise funds. And I could send that to you or anybody else who would like that as well.
I was at that presentation, and that's something I've been thinking about and studying about, so I just want to learn more about that. Thank you.
David, one answer to your question, I think, is page 165, is the auditor's listing of all of the debt obligations. Next question.
Hi, Gabrielle Luke, Hartford Village, Campbell Street. Gail, thanks for making the commute to serve our community too, so appreciate that. And then along with that, my other question is, I didn't see any reflection in the budget about the upcoming town manager search, and I was just curious, where does that fall? Particularly because I think that can be a pretty healthy expenditure.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Is that in?
Would you like to take that?
I don't know, do I?
I can take it.
Okay.
Currently, we are beginning looking for a town manager, and there will be a search committee. And the board is currently exploring different vendors, and they're being very conscientious of the amount that they're going to be spending for it. So to answer your question, there's not anything budgeted in the proposed budget. We're hopeful to have it all paid for out of the 23 budget that we're currently in that ends June 30th.
Thank you, Gail.
Great. Okay, we'll have one last question under this part of the evening, and we'll get to school. So last question for the moment is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Morris, Hartford, Vermont. I have a question about the safety review that they're talking about doing. I understand that it's a neighborhood of $50,000 in the budget for that. Is that correct? Number one. I got to ask, what prompted this when we have professional fire, police, safety officers, and everything else? Why do we need to have a review? What brought this up to have to spend $50,000 in the budget when we're spending millions for these professionals that I think are doing a fine job?
Thank you, Mike. I believe the community safety reviews, the idea is to get input from our citizens about their interactions with our fire department, our police, how they feel, what constitutes, living in a safe and welcoming environment in Hartford. And I think the consultant will take that information and sort of give us recommendations. I attended some of the community coalition meetings that were held earlier this year on safety, and it's quite interesting. I live in West Hartford, so when we got together to talk about safety, we talked about having a general store, or having, a lower speed limit in certain areas. So the idea, I think, is to get a sense of what we can do as a community to improve people's feelings of safety and comfort, and I think this will be a helpful way of getting that information. If any of the other board members want to discuss their thoughts on why it's important, I'd be happy to have them do so.
Sure, yep, quick follow-up.
Kim Souza, member, Hartford Select Board. Just to follow up on that, we're talking about not just a town survey, but a very comprehensive dive into what really strengthens the fabric of the community. And I would just like to add that both Chief Cooney and at the time, prior to current Chief Sheldon, but acting Chief Connie Kelly, expressed their support of having an independent assessment of overall. We've been hearing a lot of feedback from community members about feeling a lack of safety, and it's important for us to be able to explore that and look at like a holistic approach to what can be done about that. Thanks.
Okay, is this about the safety review?
It is.
Okay, great.
So I just wanted to offer an alternate perspective on it because I was one of two members that voted against the budget. And Oh, sorry, my name is Rocket, Hartford Selectboard. I live in the village of White River Junction. So this was one of the reasons why I voted against the budget. I do think that we have robust public safety departments, and between the select board, all of our contact information being available online, us having an open town hall, us having a deeply responsive, responsible public safety department, it seems to me that all of these seem to be reasonable opportunities for any citizen to make themselves feel heard in the event that they don't feel safe. It's the $50,000 safety review. Well, one of the concerns I have personally is also that it seems to be that some of the people who are proponents of this have not also visited the public safety departments themselves. And so I feel like that seems to be the first primary step that we could take. And it doesn't seem to me likely that at the end of this review, we will have a recommendation that would be free for the town. It seems like we are actually probably going to commit ourselves to a process that's going to be more increasingly expensive over the years.
Okay,
So that's sort of my...
thanks, Rocket, yeah.
Can you take a question about the paving budget and the roads condition in town?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I'm going to ask you to hold that question. I'll ask you first when we get to the Q&A. Yep, thank you. Okay, so Gail and Mike, if you want to step out from under the bright lights, you're welcome to at this moment.
Chuck?
And we'll give Russ a chance to get his presentation here. So we're moving into the second part of the meeting now. We're going to hear from the school board about their school budget that's proposed. And we'll take a similar amount of time, about a half an hour here for this, and hopefully have a chance for some questions. And then once again, we'll have a chance for general Q&A in the fourth part of the meeting.
I wasn't paying attention to that yet.
No meeting is complete without some sort of audio-visual tension. Excellent.
How do you do that?
No. Oh, that's the mouse.
Yeah, I did.
Marvelous. There you go.
All right. Excuse me here, you can tell that in some ways I'm technology challenged. And I apologize.
Russ, I think we're all feeling your pain here, so.
You won't be for long. What's that? I can't hear.
Slideshow at the top of the last menu you had open.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Slideshow.
No, go to view.
I don't have my hearing aids in, so I can pretend not to hear you.
Trying to get the slideshow?
Yeah.
I'll help you out. And I'm also going to get rid of your selfie cam.
I can't look at myself?
Well, we could if everyone votes unanimously.
That's okay.
But we need 100%
little
of
of
the
me
town
goes
to
a
say,
long way.
there we go. This is the button.
Ah, there we go. Yay! That may be the only time tonight you're cheering. All right. We're talking 7.5% increase in the tax rate. That's not something anybody's going to be happy about. I mean, as a board, we voted it, but it wasn't with a great enthusiasm. During my presentation tonight, I hope to show you or give you the resources to understand where that's coming from so you can make an informed decision on voting day given your individual circumstances. It is not to fund a whole bunch of new initiatives or programs. It's to maintain the investment in our schools. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. A good school system is like your homeowner's insurance. It helps protect the value of your home. Okay, so now this is the summary page, and I'll get into detail in each of the individual items. When you go to vote, you'll be voting for expenditures of $47,607,131. That's the entire district, including our collaboratives, including the tech center, who we share revenues with in Billings and other towns. Then we have 19 million of local revenues, and we'll get into the detail of that. And that comes up with education spending of $27,843,257. So that's the net, and that's one of the important numbers as we go forth tonight. The next number is equalized pupils. And unfortunately, this is a frustrating thing for us as a board, because even though we have a decrease in equalized pupils, there's actually a slight increase in number of students. That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? It is the state, but what happens is not all students are weighted the same. An elementary school student is weighted less than a high school student under the premise that a high school student is more expensive to educate. And a lot of our growth was in the elementary schools. So as they continue, that will start working more in our favor when they get to the 6th, 7th, 8th in high school grades. So we basically take that number and divide it by the 27 million, and that's our ed spending of $21,232 per pupil. The state assigns a base rate of 1%, $1, I mean. The next factor, and there's many factors that influence your property tax rate, education side, that rely on outside factors. The common level of appraisal. We've all heard about the way the real estate market was. That 77% is in theory, it represents, it's saying our grand list is only 77% of its actual fair market value. And remembering back to my elementary math classes, when you take a decimal under 1 and divide it into a number, the number goes up. So that had an extreme impact on the tax rate. So we take all these factors and divide it by, there's a convoluted calculations which I'll show, but that's how we come up with a proposed tax rate per 100,000 of, per 100,000 of 1777.90. In other words, on a $100,000 house, the proposed tax increase would be $1,778. However, statistically, in the state of Vermont, only 1 in 4 people actually pay the full education tax rate. I'll get into why in a second. And if you look down in the bottom third of the page, we have an example of the mechanism. We have somebody whose household income is $50,000. The state has assigned an income sensitivity percentage of 2.4%. So you take that percentage and multiply it by the 50,000. The maximum amount of property taxes, at least on the education side, they will be assessed is $1,205. And we have figures here from last year. So basically, for someone at the $50,000 level, the educational property tax is actually going up 0.4%. Here is the calculation. I had it written algebraically, but my fellow board members thought that was carried away. But you can see, it is a very convoluted formula. All right, Now we're going to get into some of the details. So 47,607,131 is the proposed revenues. And you can see the Career Center, 4,200,000. The Wilder School, 3.6 million in revenues. And remember, we have sending towns who participate in these programs. So even though we have to include the full number in the budget, it doesn't necessarily mean the taxpayers of Hartford are paying the full $4.2 million of expenses. Okay? So a little bit more, and especially on the local revenues. This year, the board elected to use $550,000 to buy down the tax rate. The year before, we adopted $1 million. And this is somewhat of a catch-22 in that this can't go on necessarily forever, because in theory, a school budget should balance out to zero. It never really does because it's impossible to take all contingencies in account. But I can say that we have whittled down the unreserved fund balance from a high of about 4.6 to about 2.8. So we are returning the money to you as taxpayers. And it's a balancing act because that 550 next year will be something we either have to come up with in the property tax or cut expenses. And the other thing that's a sense of pride for the district is we continue to increase revenues from our tuition towns. These are students who go to the high school. You can see that's projected to go up $360,000 in the current year. So that helps offset what we as taxpayers need to fund. And the general fund basically has $3.6 million of expenses and revenues, which means $11 million is accounted for by the tech center and the various collaborative programs. Okay, here's some breakdown of the increases by function. General education is up 1.4, and I'll get into more detail on why, but it just shows you what functional areas are increasing and by what. And I mean, special education's up about 700,000. Athletics is up about 32,000. And the athletic figure as proposed, we tasked the superintendent in reducing the expenditures, and about a third of the reduction came out of the athletics budget. The other thing that I have recently learned is that even though it says athletics, it also can provide for transportation for the one-act play to BFA St. Albans. So it encompasses both athletics and some of the other extracurricular activities. Okay. Operation of facilities and is up about 250,000. That's mainly because in last year's budget, we brought it down to 100,000. And at some point, we have to recognize you guys have been great in supporting the initiatives to keep the schools in proper working order. So we can't continue to skimp on maintenance. So that's basically where the 250,000 comes from. Okay, so here's an allocation of the 36 million, 25% goes towards the high school, 12% towards Dothanbrook, 10% towards Ottaquechee, 12% to White River School, 26% to special education and other district-wide programs, and 15% by the middle school. And these figures are derived based on proposed budgets by each of the buildings, which are presented to the superintendent by the principals, subject to review and rework when necessary. Okay, so here's the nuts and bolts of why we're up $2.9 million, at least in the general fund. There's negotiated contract increases, administrators 80,000, teachers 880,000, support staff 222,000. We only had a 12% increase in our health insurance, and there's nothing we can do about it because several years ago, it was decided that the state would handle all negotiations regarding health insurance. The building expenses here is listed at 156. We have to, by state mandate, we have to buy a new accounting software. Of course, they're not helping us pay for it. They're just saying you have to do it. There's two line items here that basically, these were funds that were paid as part of the ESSER funds. That's our equivalent to ARPA money. That's what we got to help modernize the ventilation systems and provide the necessary mental health support that our students desperately need. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit more now into the income sensitivity. I've raised the property value to $250,000, generally a little bit more representative of a value of a house here in Hartford. Someone with that same $50,000 household income, their education property tax is limited to the 1205, meaning when they get their tax bill, they'll get a credit for $3,242. At $75,000, the maximum property tax is $1,808. So they get a credit of about $2,600. And in that range, the maximum tax goes, each dollar, it goes up 2.41%. So each additional dollar of income raises your tax by a quarter of a dollar. At $95,000, your maximum tax is about $2,300, because within the program there is a cliff of $90,000 of household income, up to $89,999. They calculate what you're eligible for based on a $400,000 home. At $90,000, that goes down to $225,000. Why? I can't tell you. It's a mystery. So you can see there is a radical decrease in the property tax credit. And I can tell you practically in my business that I had a client who reduced legitimately their income by $10. It increased their property tax credit by $500. So you can talk about marginal tax rates. That would be at the extreme. Okay, here's some quotes directly from the Department of Tax's website. And it says, total spending is not the sole or the primary determinant of your tax rate. It's the amount spent per pupil. Okay, I've talked about some of these various factors. The equalized pupil, common level of appraisal, and yield are all factors provided to us by the state. The school board in itself does not have any control over these numbers directly. The yield is basically a figure the state comes up saying, we'll support this level of educational spending through sales tax, rooms and meals tax, and property taxes. So just isolating the effect of the common level of appraisal decrease, as I talked about, we're proposing a tax rate of $1,779, an extra digit there. If it had remained at the 86% that it was before, we'd actually be presenting you a budget with a 0.7 decrease in your property tax rate. So basically, the swing from 86 to 77 had an 8.2% effect on what we're proposing to you. And this goes into a little bit, and this will be available on the school's website and other places. Talks about the credit and some of the factors going into it. I found it fascinating. My fellow board members, not so much. The state does have a calculator, and I gave you the link here. So if you want to see what, in your individual cases, your maximum educational property tax will be, you can go to that link. You need your most recent property tax bill, and you can see the effect on you individually. Okay, some of the increases result or come from the increased mental health needs of our students. I did a Google search like many of us do, and I came up with 3 articles within 2 minutes. There's all sorts of them. And as I alluded to, I hope, there's a couple positions that were being funded with ESSER money for support specialists that we've spent the ESSER money, the need has not gone away. So we have to continue funding these positions to help with anxiety, depression, and acting out, because these are all have a negative impact, obviously, on a student's ability to learn. The other thing that affects us here in Hartford is nationwide, there's a teacher shortage. People are leaving the profession because of the difficulty in dealing with certain students. Vermont has that problem. Here in Hartford, we also have a problem because a starting teacher is somewhere a little north of $40,000. And if you're single and don't want a roommate, you can't find a place that you could afford. So we have to be competitive. And again, there's many articles about this, and it's been recognized as a problem for many years. So we have to stay competitive in our wages. At some point, teachers and support specialists are going to become like Aaron Judge. They're going to be free agents who can get big dollars. So we have to stay competitive. As an illustration, this year, the Hartford School District has 25 teachers with provisional licenses. They're qualified professionals. They may not have all the education certificates necessary, so we have to ask the state for a waiver. My own daughter, the first year she taught here, had a provisional license because while she had a Spanish degree, she had not finished her education degree. So, and you can see, average 5, this year, 25, so that's a 5% increase. So that's another illustration of the teacher shortage. And then below you can see some averages from different time frames. From 2015 to today, it's gone up. It's doubled, more than doubled. Okay, so I gave you an overview, and I will try to answer everyone's questions, if not tonight, Saturday, or by other means. But there's some positive things going on. I mean, in autumn of 22, 87% of students, 3 to 5, felt they were in a supportive relationship with their teachers or other professionals. And that is a key indicator in their reception of the learning. And you can see some other things where we're in not the highest percentile, but the second highest, which reflects well. And here, 6 through 12, in supportive relationships, we're in the between 80 and the 99th percentile. So again, this helps with some of the issues that are going on in schools nationwide. And again, indicates why there's still a need, because while these are generally positive, we need to do as well as we can, because then again, the more our students learn, the more effective your tax dollars are.
Russ, we're about 20 minutes in now. I want to make sure we're about 20 minutes in now. I want to make sure we have a chance for questions. Do you?
Oh, yeah.
You got a good stopping point?
Yeah, like I said, the presentation has a lot of exciting things that are going on in our schools, and I would encourage you to review it. One last thing, Chuck, and then I'll get to the question, is arts, athletics, accountability. We have ends policies which are supposed to represent what we want a student from Hartford to graduate. The board is looking at revising those end policies, but before they're actually revised, we're going to make sure that there are criteria to measure the various aspects so we can report to you how well we're doing, because that will give you another indication of that your money is being well spent. Okay? Thank you for your attendance, and I hope that I provided enough information and will continue to provide information so you can make an informed decision on Election Day.
Great, thanks, Russ, for that great presentation. Okay, does anybody have a question for Mr. North or other members of the school board or the superintendent who is also here?
Jeff Arnold from Wilder. Good job, Russ. That was well laid out.
Thank you.
The concern I have is that, like, since 2013, the budget has gone up $14 million, and the number of students has actually gone down about 150 students. And I think it's the select board's job to sort of maintain costs, keep costs down. And it's you folks that do all the negotiations with the teachers. And so that, like this year, they got an $888,000 raise, whereas the rest of us, small business owners, we don't have anywhere near the same kind of benefits. So I think with the school budget, my taxes are going to go up, like on a $400,000 house, like around $500 just from the school board part. I can't afford those kinds of increases. Then you got the town on top of that, so it's like a $700 increase in 1 year. So you've got to do a better job of negotiating the salaries, because I know 80% of the costs are salaries. Do something about the administration. Got to keep the costs down. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment, Jeff. And we do understand that, but we can't turn a blind eye to competitive conditions. And we need, like I said, we need to stay competitive. We are looking and do consider the impact of staff increases on the budget. I don't really have a really acceptable, or that's not the right word, pleasing explanation for it. I mean, yes, we're down 150 students. I'll take Jeff's word for his calculation. But if you divide that by 5 schools, that's 30 students per school. And then you divide it by number of grades, that's maybe 3 or 4 students per grade, which doesn't necessarily mean you can cut back on personnel costs.
Yes, another question, comment.
Again, Mike Morris, Hartford. Russ, or whoever can answer this. You referred to monies that are similar to the ARPA monies that the town receives. Am I correct that the school receives in the neighborhood of like $4.4 million in the last year and a half or so, in that range? Is that correct? Okay, but I don't see this reflecting items to keep costs down to the taxpayers. I mean, between the town and the school, what, roughly $7 million, and our taxes are still going up. And I hear this from a lot of people. So can you explain why your taxes are jumping up 7.5% when you receive $4.4 million, or whatever the number is, well over $4 million?
Well, a lot of that money went towards improving ventilation systems during the pandemic because our schools needed an upgrade. So the money was spent to protect the teachers and students and upgrade the facilities, thus not having to come to the taxpayers. And we did spend a reasonable amount on it, on salaries, like I indicated, because the need was there. Yes, Mike?
Well, you say some of it went to it. How much went to it? I mean, 4.4 million. You didn't spend 4.4 million on a ventilation, and you didn't spend 4.4 million on salaries. I think we deserve a better explanation in why our taxes are going up so much, and you're not explaining where this 4.4 million went, if that's the right number. It's at least that, correct?
I understand.
Okay.
I won't.
That's what I'm asking for, an explanation.
Okay. And I don't know if we have that now, or at the very least, we will have it Saturday. Because you're absolutely right. That's a great question, and we have a great answer, but until we provide it, you don't know that.
Okay, we will take note of that for Saturday. Questions for Mr. North or the school board at this point? Okay, people are free. Tom, you want to speak? This is the superintendent, for those who haven't met him.
Hello, everybody. I am not a resident of Hartford. I live in Canaan, New Hampshire. We've done several presentations on where the $4.4 million has gone at the school board meeting, so I certainly could make sure those are front and center on our website so you can actually look at what we spent. When we get grant money like that, we cannot just take it off the bottom line of the budget. We have to use it for additional services for the students and staff. So a lot of our money, most of it was spent on combating COVID, dealing with COVID in the schools, which was, as you know, tremendous. It was a tremendous effort to try to keep our schools open, which we did very well in that objective. We also did spend a lot on mental health counselors and additional staff, additional substitutes, permanent substitutes in each building, tents for outside so students could learn outside, and a lot of additional items that we had to do after school activities, summer activities. The federal government, makes sure that the money is spent in a lot of different areas to really support kids and their families. So we can have more of an answer on Saturday specifically, but also the several presentations that we did to the board. So hopefully that a little better answers your question.
Great, thanks, Tom. Okay, we're going to wrap up the second part of our meeting now. If anybody has more questions for the school board or the superintendent, feel free to hold that question and you can ask it in the fourth part of the meeting, which is coming up. Okay, great. Thanks, Russ. You're welcome to, well, actually, you might want to vacate.
Yeah.
While you can, exactly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call up our candidates for local office and give everybody a chance to say a few words to you. What we will do is have everybody make kind of an introductory statement. We'll have them come up on the stage, and then we'll open it up for questions at that point. So the first round here will just be to get the candidates introduced, get them up on stage, and get things going. So to lead it off, the first candidate on our slate is for town moderator and school moderator. That would be me. Hold your applause, we're still early in the evening. And I figured this is my audition, so I don't have any other prepared remarks to make. So I will then call up our next candidate who's free to make a statement about his candidacy or the Aaron Judge signing, and that is Joe Major. Joe, do you want to say a few words? Yeah. So I'll give each candidate 4 minutes, and I'll give them a 30-second warning in case.
Thank you, I appreciate that. First of all, I'm not sure, welcome, Hartford residents. I'm not sure how much I should actually say since I'm running unopposed. But since I like to talk, I thought that I would actually say a few words. One of the unique things about this position is that I work for both the town and the school district. And one of the things that I hear quite often from residents, what exactly does the treasurer do? And so I review payroll, accounts payable, as well as expenditures in the town and on the school board. I'm the liaison between the bank and those entities as well. The treasurer finally makes sure that all warrants from either the school or the town boards are paid. I was appointed in April of last year when John Clerkin decided to retire. And I have to say that I have to thank John, and we as a town have to thank John because he was tireless in his effort and dedicated to this town. He was a select board member, he was a state rep, and he is a business owner here in the town, as well as a treasurer. I think I should now talk a little bit about myself. I'm a graduate of Howard University in Washington, D.C. While at Howard, I participated in ROTC and was commissioned an officer in the United States Army. I'm currently the executive director of the Upper Valley Aquatic Center, and I'm on several boards here in Hartford. Northern Stage, the Headrest Board, as well as the the White River Rotary. And on March 7th, what I will ask you to do is not write someone else's name, but to vote for me as well. Lastly, I wanted to take this time to acknowledge the passing of a wonderful servant in this community. Last week, accounting specialist Donna Nadu succumbed to cancer. She grew up here in Hartford, and she graduated in these halls of Hartford High School. She was the quintessential daughter of Hartford. Over the last 2 decades, she gave every bit of her life to this town. Time and time again, she supported Hartford, counseled residents, and guided citizens of Hartford along with myself. Hartford will miss Dawn, and I will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And on behalf of the entire Board of Civil Authority, we do hope you won't write anybody in. Okay, our next candidate who may be here, and if so, please come forward, Laura Renee Brooks, a candidate for a 5-year term on the West Hartford Library.
I didn't expect to be called up so soon. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Renee Brooks. I'm on the West Hartford Board of Trustees for the library, and I was elected last year to be on the board. That was the end of a 5-year term, and this is the beginning of a new 5-year term. I moved to West Hartford with my husband and 5 kids from Massachusetts at the end of 2020. I currently work as a first grade teacher at the Ottaquiche School, where some of my children attend. I don't have a ton of spare time, but when I do, I enjoy walking in the woods, learning little bits and pieces of homesteading, and we just got our first chickens about a year ago. Last year, I joined the Board of Trustees or about a year and a half ago, and last spring, I was elected to complete a 1-year term. So shortly after the election, I took over the position of president of the board. And since that time, we've done some really exciting things at the library. We restarted the farmers market for the first time since COVID, and it was intended by somewhere between 6 and 15 farmers and vendors every week during the summer. Our board's been working recently on updating all of our policies and procedures to put them in line with our larger goal of ensuring that the library is a safe, welcoming place for everyone in the community. Recently, I was able to open a library as a warming space with electricity and power when many of our neighbors were without power during a big storm. In the near future, we've been working with the town to improve the library's capabilities to provide emergency services and heating and cooling for the village if that ever happens again. We're also always looking for people to join us in making West Hartford Library into the living room of West Hartford. So if that sounds like something you'd like to participate in, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you join. Thanks everyone.
Great, thank you, Laura. Okay, our next candidate, who may well be here as well, would be to serve the final 2 years of a 5-year term on the West Hartford Library Board, and that's Patricia Newton-Gray. Patricia, are you here? Okay, I didn't see her, which is fine. Okay. I'm going to skip now quickly to the school board. We have 2 unopposed races there. We'll get these candidates up here as well. So the first candidate for the school board for a 2-year seat is Douglas H. Heavisides Sr.
Hello. I have a very short history. I was born here. I grew up in Wilder. I went through the school system. I graduated from Hartford High. I went into nurses training. I've spent 47 years in hospital administration, working at DHMC. I've been retired now for 12 years. I had the privilege about 4 years ago, I think, to participate in the Wilder School Committee. This last year, I volunteered to help with the Facilities Committee and enjoyed it. And I filled in the last 2 months for board meetings because of resignation. And I've really enjoyed it, and I'd like to continue to do it for another 2 years. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Doug. We also have Coach Christie with us here. I think Coach is going to speak to us from either that microphone, or do you want to take a seat? It should be on already, yeah.
There we go. Welcome, everyone, to one of our schools and to hurricane country. I'm really proud of our community and our schools. I've been actively involved in our school and our community since 1973. I won't get into to the litany too deeply, but I've been volunteering in the community early on in the 70s, helped to start the Quechee Fast Squad, the Quechee Chamber, the Balloon Festival, the Scottish Festival. And then Miss Pat Lewis, for those of you who remember Pat, who was our postmistress in Quechee, tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Kevin, we heard that you did sports when you were in high school and college." And I'm going like, how did you hear that? You know, this is obviously before Facebook and all of that stuff, you know, unless my resume was hung up on the wall somewhere. But she had asked if I would consider helping out with the track team, you know, here in Hartford. So I did, and that got me actively involved in the school. Later on, did a number of substitute teaching stints, and during that time, asked again, would I consider, you know, a full-time position, and I applied and started teaching in '86. And another request, assistant coaching of football as well as track. So being a participant of sorts, I said, sure, why not? This is such a special place. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I think that, when I see dissonance, in it, like we're experiencing to some degree, now, that's very disheartening. And I hope that we can work both through the schools and through our town to bring us all together, because this is that special place. 50 plus years here says that to me, and it means a lot. I know, I look around this room and I know a lot of you. I've had your kids in school, I've married, some of them, sorry about that. I've helped to
This is an unexpected AV moment.
No, that was the alarm. And I'm not, yeah, wake up. Something's going on. But again, that's what this is about, and, somebody, said to me the other day, well, you politicians, all, and I said, okay, let's get one thing straight. I don't consider myself a politician. I am a public servant, always have been, always will be. That's what my mother raised.
Kevin, I'll give you just about 30 more seconds.
Great, good. I can wrap it up really quickly. But I believe in our community, and it is one of the best in the state in so many ways. And I'd like to see us continue to grow that, and I will continue to provide as much energy in helping us get to that goal as possible. So I'm running for the 3-year term again with the school board, and I would really appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, for the select board this year, we have 2 open seats, and we have 2 people running for each of those seats. So we'll get a chance now to hear from those 2. So for the 2-year seats, I've got 2 slips of paper here. You can trust a Yankees fan to do this. Okay, Janelle, we'll hear from you first, so come on up. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Janelle Sahutski. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm seeking the 2-year seat on the Select Board. My wife and I moved to Vermont and chose to settle in Quechee after I discovered it a few years before on a road trip with my mom. Having previously lived in big cities, which tend to overwhelm, we were looking for a more rural location with great recreation opportunities and a friendly, civically engaged community, and we found that home in Hartford. The community has been welcoming, and I have found meaningful connection through volunteering and civic participation. I volunteer on a diversity, equity, and inclusion board that works to make Quechee and the Upper Valley a more welcoming place for all. I also currently volunteer at the Haven, where I enjoy working with the volunteers and patrons alike. Additionally, I've met many fellow Hartforders at events like Coffee with Constituents to meet with our state elected representatives, Green Up Day, a workshop for cross-class collaboration for action on poverty and inequity, and the Pride Parade hosted by the Main Street Museum. I'm grateful to live here and have unique opportunities to participate in events that have truly enriched my life. My interest in the built environment led me to pursue a bachelor's in building construction and a master's in historic preservation. As an architectural conservator, I am tasked with the protection of buildings as physical manifestations of our cultural past. Within this profession, I have been both a materials conservator and a project manager. While working for a statewide preservation nonprofit, I managed the general maintenance and preservation of 11 historic properties as well as 2 staff members. And as a materials conservator, I work in the field and lab to diagnose problems, create comprehensive plans, and physically implement those plans to prolong the useful life of materials and consequently the building's integrity. I believe that Hartford's historic past should be an integral part of its future. As social issues evolve and change the way we interact with each other and our environment, historic buildings continue to serve as a link to a past worth preserving. And this is just an aside here, but I believe that the greenest buildings are those that are already built. So you can ask me more about that later. I have watched and attended select board meetings of the past year, observing the roles and responsibilities. I'm seeking this position because I have the privilege of time and the desire to serve my community. I'm looking forward to connecting with residents I might not normally cross paths with and enjoying the unique experience of a group of diverse people with varied experiences joining together to collaborate and problem solve to create a more livable community for all people. As a member of the Select Board, I will offer and also expect in return respectful and inclusive communication, empathy, accountability, and creative thinking and problem solving. My experience with the built environment makes me an asset for evaluating construction project plans through my ability to ask thoughtful questions and offer clarification. A fresh perspective is important to continued growth, and I'm committed to lifelong learning and evolving in an effort to better coexist. Someone last week asked me, "What do you even know about Hartford?" My response was, "I know that I recreate here, I patronize the businesses and eat in the restaurants, I use the trails and parks, I'm a member of the co-op, I've met amazingly kind people, and I chose to make my home here, and I know it's where I want to stay and serve. I'm excited to keep discovering Hartford by engaging in cultural activities, continuing my involvement in town matters, and collaborating with the community. And who knows, I might even learn how to tap a maple tree." I'm Janelle Sahutski, and I'm asking for your vote early or on March 7th here at Hartford High. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Our second candidate for the 2-year Select Board seat is Lannie Collins. Come on up, Lannie.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank the members of the audience. Thank you, Janelle. So I did not have a prepared speech because I firmly believe that best speeches come from the heart, and that's where I'm coming from my heart on this. So a little about me. I'm a lifelong Hartford resident, and I'm going to stop there for a second and talk about the importance of history of the town of Hartford. I think it's important you have a basic understanding of where our history has been in the town of Hartford, where we've been, so we don't repeat some of the mistakes we've made in the past. It doesn't mean that you have to be here for 10, 15, 20, in my case, 56 years. But I think that a solid understanding of Hartford's history is important. And I definitely have that history being a lifelong member of Hartford. I graduated from the school in 1984. I'm proud of that. I firmly believe in giving back to my community, which I have done. As a member of the Hartford Fire Department, I volunteer for 15 years and on the ambulance. I've seen some fires here in the town of Hartford and picked people up on the ambulance, perhaps some of your family members. I was in the National Guard, Army National Guard, a veteran for over 20 years. I served during a hurricane or tropical storm Irene cleanup, so proud to do that. So one of the things that I would like to see coming forward for the Select Board, first off, let me back up and say that I attended select board meetings for over 4 years before I got elected to be on the select board. I think that says a pretty good statement about my dedication and willingness to observe and learn and what the roles and responsibilities are of select board members. So that's important, I think. So you have to pardon me, I think I'm coming down with something here. So we've gone through quite a bit here in the last few years in Hartford. Some things that haven't been so good for the town of Hartford, and we're still holding on, which is important. We lost a town manager. We lost a very good police department chief. We lost our public works director. And we've had people step up in the town of Hartford to take on these jobs. And I think we've done a great job of having our department heads take on those roles, move forward. So one of the things that, when you look at the select board in the town of Hartford, one of the things that makes me stand out is that, like Rocket, I don't have the same values as my other board members. And I think that's good in a way, because we need diversity on the select board. If we do not have the diversity, we don't have a firm base of everyone within the town of Hartford for voices to be heard. I think that I offer an additional lens that provides a different perspective that serves to strengthen the community and the board. I strongly value the conversation to allow me to learn and better understand differing opinions. And my goal is to seek to understand, support, and caretake for the citizens of the town of Hartford. So the goals I have are, we need to get back to administration of the town. We have a lot of things that happen that are really not within the purview of the town of Hartford as far as the select board. We need to care more about our infrastructure, our departments, taking care of what's broken, and moving forward with those things.
About 30 more seconds, Lannie.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. So we need to acknowledge that all voices are heard. Those that are disenfranchised in our community, across the spectrum. We need to establish a collective process that's been lacking in the town with the school system. There's a fracture in between the town and the school. We need to fix that. And we need to get the citizens to buy in as well on that. I would like to see us doing more about asking what the citizens need and less about telling them what we think they need.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your support.
Okay, we have 2 candidates for a 3-year seat on the select board. We're going to go back to the well here. Okay, first we'll hear from Mike Hoyt.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Mike Hoyt, currently chair of the select board. I'm running for a 3-year seat on the 7th of March. Some of you know about me last time I ran, but just a quick recap. I've lived in West Hartford since 2018. I grew up in Norwich. I currently work for Dartmouth College. Prior to that, I worked as an attorney for the Vermont State Legislature. I was elected in a special election in August 2021. And then I was elected chair last March 2022. And so we have like a year to look back on, since I've been in there and things the board has done. And it's been a year of transition. I fully admit that. When I came into the board, it felt like, to some extent, Hartford didn't have a real plan. We didn't quite know where we were going. We had a lot of people in acting, in interim roles, things like that. So it sort of felt like there was some work that we needed to do to get Hartford kind of back on a good path. And I think we've achieved some of that. I think we have work still to do. So one of the main things, of course, that happened with the board was we had an amicable parting with our town manager. That happened essentially in October. She was put on administrative leave, and we had a settlement with her in December. You know, those can be very delicate situations. They often end up in lawsuits, and I think that we did a good job, you know, parting ways in a way that was amicable. Since then, the town has appointed a new police chief who seems to be making a very good impression. We have a permanent director of public works. We've started a town manager search committee and are taking nominations from members of the public. I think you have until tomorrow to actually put your name in, and we will make appointments to that search committee on March 6th prior to the election. So I feel like in a lot of ways, we are taking these steps to improve Hartford. I think the budget process went very well this year. It had some hiccups last year. A lot of that is thanks to the great work of Gail Ostrout, our financial director and acting town manager. So I think we are in a good place. I would be honored if I had the opportunity to continue serving in the board to see this work continue. I think there's a lot of things coming up in the next year or so that are really important. We've got to get the town manager selection right. That's key. We've got a charter update that will be presented before the voters. And other things, you know, we just spent ARPA money, but there's infrastructure money from the Federal Infrastructure Act. Instead of that coming directly to the town, that goes to the state and then comes to the town in forms of grants. And so we really need to make sure we've got the right people in the right leadership positions to identify those opportunities. So I thank you all very much. I'd be honored to have your vote and continue what I think is the very good work that the town employees and the select board has done over the past year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Our second candidate for the 3-year seat on the select board is Francis Danaher. Come on up. Thank you, Chuck.
Excuse me. Good evening. My name is Francis Danaher. I live on Dothan Hill in Hartford. I'm a candidate for the 3-year term for the Hartford Select Board. It's an honor and pleasure to stand before you tonight. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. I'd like to thank my wife, Colleen, my friends, my families, for being here tonight to support me and helping me with this journey. I would not be here tonight if it weren't for a guy named Rocket. I was inspired by him. I figured if he could do this, so can I. I always thought I'd be running for office when I was 25, but now I'm doing it at 65, and you're far better off, for now I have some wisdom and experience under my belt. My family has lived on Dothan Hill for nearly 100 years. I was born, raised, and schooled here in Hartford. I'm a product of this community. I'm running for this seat on the board because I believe the board is out of balance and out of step with the needs of this community. The current board is steering this town in the wrong direction. We are off course, and I want to help direct the board back to carrying out the duties stated in the town charter. I want to help the board return to the administrative duties it is charged with rather than chasing social and cultural issues. I want to steer the board back towards fixing the town's crumbling infrastructure. I want to balance the board so that we are presented with a budget that is clear and easily understood. I want to steer the board back to carrying out the will of the people they represent. A board that does not smuggle in their policies. They need to present them honestly and transparently. I do not believe the public wants parking meters and our libraries to be funded by ballot questions. In order for this town to prosper, we need to attract the best and the brightest. Unfortunately, due to management, we are not drawing the talent we need for the future. Our policies are driving them away. We must choose by merit, not identity. In the end, we must decide whether this current select board is working for themselves or for us. For far too long, this board has been unchecked, unaccountable, and invisible. We are tired of excuses. We want answers and action. I certainly don't know everything about this town. I don't have all the answers. But I do have ideas. I do have history. I do have ambition. I think it's worth my time to step up and help out. It should be worth yours as well. Together, we can make a difference, but it won't start until you go out and vote. There's a lot of change taking place today in the world, in the nation, and in this town. It is important to understand, participate, and direct the course of this change. It is important to understand, participate, and direct the course of this change. It is important to have a voice in change. It is important to have a choice in change. I want to be your voice. I want to be your choice. I want to be your choice for change. When I was young, I remember John F. Kennedy invoking the words, "It's not what your country can do for you, it's what you can do for your country." And these words resonate today like never before.
About 30 seconds, Patrick.
It's time for me to give back to the community, and it's time for me and you and all the citizens of this town to act, to stand up and make a difference. We need to balance the board. We need to change course. We need a choice for change. Thank you. My name is Patrick Francis Danaher. I'm running for the 3-year term on the Hartford Select Board.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the fourth and final quarter here of our meeting. This is a chance for people to ask questions of the candidates, follow up on things that you've heard.
Chuck, point of order.
Yes.
Can I get this light dim?
The question is whether the lights in everybody's eyes is part of the hazing process. I don't know, Lannie, that I can help you with that, I'm afraid. So a chance to ask candidates questions, also a chance to ask follow-up questions about the budget, and that we heard from the school board and from the select board. And I did promise the first question to Mr. Parker, who I interrupted right at the last break. So we'll start off with you, sir.
I interrupted you, Chuck. Thank you. My name is Ken Parker. I live in Hartford Village. I don't know about the rest of you here in the community, but I'm kind of fed up with the condition of the roads in this town. I think that the board's remiss in not putting more money into the budget for paving. I go back a few years when a time when I was on the board, and we had a standard at that time that basically suggested that we put $1 million a year into the paving budget. And at that time, I think it cost about $100,000 a mile to pave. You're putting $750 or $775 in, and I think today's paving costs are about $150,000 a mile. The standard was that we would pave our roads on a cycle about once every 11 years. And in doing that, we preserved the foundation of the roads. If you drive up Christian Street, VA Cutoff Road, you'll see that there's now a seam in the middle of the road. And that's a sign that the road is failing and that the foundation of that road is failing. And if you think it's expensive to pave a layer on top of a road, wait till you see the cost to start rebuilding our highways. At the present rate that you've funded, that's about 5 miles of paving. We have 132 miles of highway in this community. Not all of it's paved roads, but a substantial portion of it is. we have the most highway mileage of any town in the state of Vermont. And we can't ignore the fact that we haven't been, that we're not maintaining our highways. I've looked at the budgets over the last few years and looked to see how much money was put into paving. And it's about a $525,000 or $550,000 average per year. What are we doing to ourselves? This is crazy. We're building up an expense in the future that's going to drive us. If you think your taxes are going up now, wait till you see what the cost to do the work that's necessary, not desirable, but necessary to our roads. So I know you've got a significant amount of money in the unexpended fund balance. In fact, I saw the number $2.6 million a little while ago. And I think you've carved some of that out so that you're going to be spending it for some other things. But, you know, that money is there for this sort of thing, this sort of action on our highway work. And we need to do the work that's necessary. Without it, we're going to have a real problem down the road. No pun intended. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Yes, please.
Hi.
Sorry, yes, that's a great point. Thanks, Lannie. Yeah, any member of the Select Board wish to respond? Yes, Mr. Collins.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken, for bringing that up. One of the things that's always been attacked in any season, budget season, or throughout the year is the paving. It's an easy pot that select boards have taken from in the past. And it's unfortunate because our roads end up suffering because of it. We have budgets for a reason, and we need to stick with those budgets and focus on the needs that we have before us. And when we keep attacking the paving budget, we run into this problem that you stated. And the roads are getting deteriorated, and it's going to come back to haunt us. Boards in the past have just, I'm sorry, we failed to do the right thing by the roads. We've got to stop taking from paving just because it's an easy pot to take from. We have a new public works director that's going to come on board, and hopefully we can correct this in the future. But you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thanks, Lannie. Janelle or anybody else wish to speak to this? Great. Okay. Actually, next question, Dan, you were up first. Yeah.
Dan Fraser, Hartford, Vermont. I just want to say it's 2023, and I'm appalled at the discrepancy we have here. So I'm asking the panel of candidates, I'm asking the moderator, I'm asking Chico if we could perhaps have the candidates come down and sit here so everyone's on a level playing field, because we need to make sure that our facilities are accessible, and I don't think it's fair that we have a candidate that's not able to sit with the rest of the board.
Thanks, Dan, for that suggestion. Candidates want to move down? Join Coach here in the front row?
You can just go up the ramp. You can come around the ramp.
Just, yeah, grab your chair.
Hey, Chuck?
Yeah.
My one concern of everyone moving down is that reduced visibility for what the broadcast, the lighting and the broadcast.
Okay. Okay. It's our house. Okay. Thanks, Coach. Coach has indicated that he feels okay with the current arrangement, and I appreciate, Dan, your comment and suggestion. That's wonderful. And something that we can think more about here for upcoming meetings. Yes.
Kathy Malisic, Wilder, Vermont, and I'm wondering whether Dan and I saw the same video about the candidate who had to get on stage because it wasn't accessible. I'll send you the link. So I had, and to Mr. Collins' comment about the paving also, I would like to, we've brought up before the current board, the issues with the water mains that continually break in Wilder. So I'm looking forward to that being addressed, whoever is elected for these two open positions. I have a question about the common level of appraisal and a question for a specific candidate. Multitasking, do you prefer one or the other?
Sure. Why don't you start with the CLA, and
Okay.
If people are interested in asking questions, do come forward, because that gives me an idea of where we are in the meeting. So yeah, we'll start.
Very quick.
We'll start with CLA.
Okay, so my question about the CLA, sorry, I should have my readers on. We're at, what, 70-something% for that? And I know the legislature requires that municipalities are supposed to reappraise if the CLA is below 85%. I'm not even going to go to the overappraised 115% because we're not there. And so what are the plans for the CLA to be addressed so that we meet state requirements?
Great question, maybe.
And lower my taxes. I meant to get that in.
Hi, we've talked about that in some of our board meetings with the assessor. So, yeah, when you get a certain discrepancy in the common level appraisal, it actually triggers like a town-wide reappraisal, right? And what's interesting is, you know, for the last however many number of years, Vermont would average like 5 or 6 reappraisals a year. This year, it seems like it's hit critical mass across the state, and there's something like over 100 reappraisals coming. So it's going to be really hard to like get like appraisers out there to do this kind of stuff. But Joe Turner's our assessor, and he's done a really good job. He's in contact with the state. What we basically have to do is have a plan in place for how we're going to conduct the reappraisal. I think I don't know if it's by 23 or 24, but in any event, the state doesn't expect we actually get it done like within that time frame because there's just so many more municipalities that have to do that than have had to do it in the past. So it's basically like we need a plan from our assessor like how we're going to do it. And then I think the state, they're going to give us some leeway on the actual like time frame for getting it done because they're going, like I said, from 6 a year to like over 100 this year. So it is something we know about. We've got some plans in place for dealing with that.
Thank you. I know I've been reading the articles about how everybody's looking for this now, so I'm looking forward to that happening again. And I had a question for Mr. Danaher,
Yes, yeah, thank you.
I'm addressing them though.
I do.
Oh, Select Board can't mention on CLA? That's fine. I just heard something about your taxes going down because
Yes, I'm happy to continue the discussion of the CLA. Rocket, go ahead.
Okay, well, it's just that the issue, so the grand list gets reevaluated, your tax rate will fall, but the actual tax dollar amount that you pay will probably still be equitable because the tax rate gets backed in. So just to be clear that the reappraisal, which does need to be done, is not going to necessarily result in your taxes, your total tax payout being less.
It could actually result in my
It could. Well, the
less.
great benefit of it, really, and I'm very supportive of it, is that it will reassess taxes equitably according to property values across town.
Yeah, I know how it works.
Okay.
I'm just wondering when we're going to be able to do it again.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chuck.
Yeah,
This
thanks,
is
Joe.
candidates night.
I'm sorry.
The candidates are supposed to be spotlighted here. I understand that you wanted to ask her question.
Sure.
But this is candidates night and budget night.
What
So,
budget
no,
and candidate?
Candidates night and so
Okay.
she asked a question to the candidates. I appreciate it, but the candidates have the spotlight tonight.
Okay, enjoy the spotlight. Apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Major.
If anybody wants to write in Joe Major for moderator, that's fine by me.
Buffalo Bills fan, we can't have
Uh-oh.
Are there other candidates or members who wish to speak to the CLA question? Yeah, I just want to make sure we're good on CLA. Okay.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, Kathy.
My other question is, I'm curious, it's a question for Mr. Danaher, and I'm curious how many select board meetings you've attended and/or other planning commissions, zoning board, how many town meetings you've attended in, say, the past year?
Well, I'm on the housing committee, so I've attended that meeting. I've been to one town meeting. I followed all of them on Zoom and.
All the select board meetings?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Yes, next question. Come on down.
Hi, I'm Mary Alice Leonard Heath. I live over on Hanover Street in White River Junction. And I guess I would like to follow up to Kathy's question addressed to Janelle.
Sure. So I've been watching them on Zoom, like Mr. Danaher, and then I came in person once I decided that I was going to be, that I decided that I wanted to run. I started coming in person.
And have either of you been to any of the planning commission meetings or the many other committee meetings? Because there's a lot going on in this town.
Well, there certainly is. I followed them on Zoom and those type of outlets. But no, I've not in person been to those meetings.
And I've been to, I would say, more than half of the other committee meetings in person, including the one that helped plan this event. to introduce myself to people and get an idea of what's going on.
Great, thank you. Can I just ask another question?
Sure, we'll give you a
About the
second. Yeah.
Budgets.
Here you are.
So listening to the Select Board budget meeting was really worrisome and painful. And I was feeling like I handed my checkbook to my then teenage daughter and asked her to decide what bills to pay and what we needed, how she thought we should handle our money. It was just, it was very difficult to listen to. And one of the things is, studies. And back to the public safety study, I've had a lot of contact with fire, ambulance, and police in this community, and have always had such positive response from them. And it just really confuses me why we have to spend $50,000 to study this issue when we have employees and volunteers who are working within these structures. And I'm wondering, and I don't know how to do this, but I would really like to know how the Select Board interfaces with actual people who are keeping us safe and keeping us healthy when they bring us to the hospital or put fires out at our house. Do they do ride-alongs, or do they do go to the police station and fire station and interface with actually people who are doing this work? And so I don't know if I'm asking, I guess I'll ask the two Select Board members, current Select Board members, but it's just a concern and a question about why we're spending that $50,000 on a study.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mary Alice. Yeah, if any of the four of you wish to speak to that, that'd be great. Lannie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Alice. So this is one of the things that's disturbing to me is, as you stated, is all sorts of study. And it's interesting, our Select Board members that we have on the board, they always, what we keep hearing all the time is trust our experts. Whenever I bring anything up for a disagreement that I have for facts that I've personally researched, it's always said we have to trust our experts. But it's interesting in this case as far as safety reviews, and I'll speak to one in particular, the West Hartford Bridge. So during the discussion of this, both the fire chief and the police chief, or the acting police chief, Connie Kelly, were in the room at that time. And I asked them directly whether there was any concerns about safety on the West Hartford Bridge. And they both said no. And yet the board still voted for this safety concerns study that there was there. So how are we we're not trusting our experts. I mean, we want to trust our experts sometimes when they say one thing, but we don't want to trust our experts on the other thing. Our planning and development director said we need to do the study, but you have the people that are responsible for safety in the town, the police chief and the acting fire chief, telling you that there's no reason to worry about the safety, that they've had no reported concerns. I'm sorry, that doesn't balance out right, Do we want to listen to experts, or do we not want to listen to experts?
Thanks, Lannie.
Thank you.
Mike, do you want to speak to that as a candidate?
Sure. I just wanted to address the other part of Mary Alice's questions. Like, we do interact with fire and police very often. We go to the police. I haven't done a ride along personally, but we do hear from the chief quite a bit. We heard from the acting chief quite a bit. Scott Cooney comes in all the time, so we do get a chance to interact with them and get to build relationships with them. And they're a trusted resource for us to come in and tell us, their thoughts on certain issues. So we do have a chance. I think another Select Board member who's in the audience spoke, I think, very well about the community's safety review. This isn't intended to be negative towards the police or fire. People have a lot of positive interactions with them, and that's something that is important for us to know as well. But there may be people in the community who, either don't interact with fire or police, or they're hesitant to do so. And I think it's important if we know if there are barriers to people going out and making those relationships. So. We do interact with them quite a bit. They're great. They do incredible work, and we're very lucky to have them here in the town.
Thanks, Mike. Either of the candidates, Janelle? Yes?
Sure. So some of the things that I've heard from people is, one, some of the kids don't feel safe at school, whether that's about bullying, whether that's about potential gun violence, or apparently some of the middle schoolers may be bringing knives to school. So there's some of the kids at school feel unsafe. And so I think that's one of the places where maybe they're not necessarily approaching the police or fire about that. And walking to school, some kids feel unsafe walking to school because of speeding cars and things like that that haven't been addressed. And some people have also had concerns about safety on Hartford Ave as well. And I would just like to say that not all people are comfortable contacting the police or the fire in some of these instances, just given the general world climate.
Great, thanks, Janelle. Patrick, any comment on that?
No comment.
Okay. Yes, next question.
Actually, it's a couple. Harry Lou Salza, Hartford Village. I as well have a huge, huge issue with this budget on many, many avenues. To Janelle, to what you just spoke to, that's why we hired a social worker in this town, and that's why the chief of police wants to hire another social worker. So it's not fire, and it's not police. So we're putting our money towards that. We've looked at that. We are continuing to look at that. $80,000 for an assessment on the Bugby Center. If I need something done at my house, I go to contractors. We have project contractors in the Upper Valley that are very qualified. They could walk into that building and do an assessment and say what it needs. Then we take the highest bid. We wouldn't be spending $80,000 to say what's wrong. I'm not really sure why we didn't look at that. Because $80,000 is going to go by and the work isn't going to be done. Parking meters. 3 years ago, we had a vote. Yes, it was to use the LOH funds. But if anybody was in this town listening, there were lots of voters that said no to the parking meters. 2,088 voters. It wasn't all about the LOH money. It was about fixing parking for the housing that's going on and the businesses. If you're a business in Hartford and you have an employee, the parking meters, they can't feed them. It's not going to do any good. You're still not going to have parking for, even with the meters, for business employees and for all the apartments that we have approved on South Main Street. $233,000 to do something that lots of people in this town said no to. Mike Flake, why?
Thank you, Mary Lou. I'm actually the worst board member to answer this question.
You are the chairman.
I voted against the parking meters, so they're on the ballot. And if anyone watches the select board meetings, Lannie will tell you I've been against them from the very beginning. So making a defense of them is probably not the best thing for me to do. I know the thinking behind it is that it'll help improve turnover and traffic, but I may actually agree with you on this one. So, you know, look, it got in the budget. Would I have actually put in there if I was the sole person deciding? No, I wouldn't. But I'm still going to support the budget. You don't always get everything you want. And I'm one of, 7 on there, and majority rules. So I do, I actually agree with you on the parking meters, but I do encourage everyone to vote for the budget, even if it has things in it that you may personally not like.
So a clarification to myself. The HART money and all that stuff that's listed to spend is linked into the budget. So if the budget dies, that list dies too?
No, I believe that the ARPA funding has just been expended.
Okay.
So
you've already
there's
spent
no
it.
real vote on it. Yeah.
You've already spent it.
Yep.
Thanks, Mary Lou.
Lannie, did you want to, or Pat or Lannie, did you have anything to talk about?
No, Mike, I prefer not to be thrown under the bus on that one.
All right, Lannie.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question over here.
Good evening, Suzanne Abedi, River Junction. I have a question about the parking meters. I've been, when I first came here in 2009, there was no parking problem There were plenty of spots. And as an avid shopper, I've kept my finger on the pulse of parking. I've always been very careful about the 2-hour limit, which, to my knowledge, has never been enforced. I've never seen a chalk mark on a tire or a ticket on any windshield. So I'm really flummoxed at the vote of the town of the citizens saying no to parking meters and have it show up again. Because, first of all, it's a huge amount of money, but how is it going to be enforced? You're going to need, I mean, I've lived in places where the attendants are the most hated people in town because they write tickets. I mean, they fear for their lives in some places because it's an ugly job, but someone's got to do it, right? But if we've never enforced the 2 hours by either, like, you know, ask any shopkeeper who are the ones, they know which cars have been there all day because they keep their eye on the pulse of parking. How can we possibly, without incurring more expense, to hire a parking meter person who's not going to be very popular in town? That's going to be an added salary, or we're going to put more pressure on the police force. It just makes no sense to me why we would spend money that we voted against when the current 2-hour parking isn't even being enforced, not even once in a while. I've never seen it enforced. I've never seen a warning or a parking ticket. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Suzanne. I
Chuck,
feel like this.
I'd be happy to address that, Chuck.
Okay, thanks, Lannie. Great.
So, okay, Suzanne, thank you. I'm going to take a cue from Mike, and I'm going to address this. So, the thought process behind parking meters is that if you go, we've spent a great deal of money from our TIF district, yes, TIF district, from TIF district funds downtown to try to revitalize our downtown. And we've done a great job of building that up. But with that comes the concern about parking downtown because of all the businesses. But in addition to the businesses with the TIF funds, there's also been funding for residential apartments downtown. And these people that have the apartments downtown, they're parking on the street. They're doing on-street parking. And when you're parking on street for extended periods of time, that takes the ability of the shopkeepers to have their merchants to have their customers park on street. So the objective is to turn over the parking and get the people that are parking on street that are living in the housing off the streets and into the South Main Street parking lot. As far as the paying for the services, they will pay for themselves. The parking fees collected will pay for a parking attendant over time. We try to look at Hanover as a model for this, and Hanover makes, I don't know the exact amount of money, but they make quite a bit of money off of parking. All right, it's not the be all to end all, but it's better than having a $4 million parking garage in Hartford. There's not a good answer other than having a $4 million parking garage. We need to get the vehicles off the streets that don't belong there, get them turned over. So and as far as chalking vehicles' tires, we've heard about that. It's illegal in the state of Vermont to chalk vehicle tires anymore. So that doesn't work. So thank you. It's not a good answer on parking. Try to come up with one.
Any of our other 4 candidates want to speak to the meters?
Good, Janelle?
Well, I have a question, Lannie. How did this issue come up? I mean, if the voters decided they didn't want parking meters and now the select board just decides to implement them?
Sure.
Yep. Well, and again, it's because of we've had complaints about not being able to have parking downtown, and when we don't have parking downtown, the only way to implement parking is to get it turned over. You can't just materialize parking out of thin air. We only have a certain number of parking spaces. You know, we need to get those people that are parking in parking spaces that are doing long-term parking. They need to be in the South Main Street parking lot, and that's the key. The other thing that was brought before the board is that Mr. Morris, who's standing up, he brought before the town that there was an opportunity, I don't mean to steal your thunder, Mike, but there was an opportunity for the town to purchase land behind the old Comfort Warehouse downtown, to purchase land for parking. And somehow that got dropped. So there's other opportunities for parking, but it's just one of those things. You spend money in the downtown, you're going to increase the number of cars that there, you got to get turned over. I spent probably 10 minutes driving around looking for a spot the other day, and I ended up parking in the South Main Street parking lot, having to walk.
Great, thanks, Lannie. Okay, yes, next question at the microphone.
Mary Lou, did you turn this down this low? Reflective of Ken Parker's comments on paving, if you worked out the ratios that he shared with us, which are all legitimate, it wouldn't be $500,000 a year, it would be 1.4 to keep up with the 11-year cycle of streets. So we have backed into, in my opinion, a place where deferred maintenance is going to call for lump sum allotments. And those typically, as we do when we put capital improvements into our own homes, we have to go to long-term debt. So I've been a student the last couple of years of bonded indebtedness. So this question is going out to the select board candidates. How do you feel about the concept of managed debt in terms of working our way out of some of these backlogs?
Thank you, David. Who wants to go first?
I will go. Thank you, Chuck. So Dave, are you talking about like bonding for like infrastructure payments? Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in support of that. I think you were there when we had the bond bank presentation. Hartford's in a very good place, I believe from that presentation they said to take on increased debt. And frankly, yeah, you know, we're going to come up with some projects, infrastructure projects we're not always going to have federal funds for. And I think the ability to bond for something, have it go for the vote, take on that long-term debt is in our interest in continuing to develop the town, particularly the downtown. Lannie, do you want to talk?
Yeah.
Patrick?
I'll address that as well. It's, you know, we've all heard the term kicking the can down the road. And there's only so long you can kick that can down the road before it starts to fill up with dust and get really heavy and you kick it with your toe and it hurts. So that's what we're coming to, is that we need to put funds aside every year to pay for this stuff. We just can't ask the taxpayers to pull one lump sum out of their wallets every year and say, guess what, folks, here's what is coming. That doesn't work. If we manage a little bit every year, it's a lot more cost effective. So you're absolutely right, David. We need to do better planning towards our debt reduction and our bonds. Thank you.
The two candidates wish to address this.
Thanks for the question, David. I support it. I think it's a valuable tool, and our town should be using it more often.
Okay. Great. Yes. Next question.
Mike Morris again, still a Hartford resident. Quickly, with the meters, if I may say, the ballot had on it where we to use lot money, local option tax money, to fund the meters. It was not, do you want meters? So let's clarify that. That's what was on the ballot. Do you want to use local option money to fund the meters? The decision was made to get meters by the select board at that time. It was where the money was going to come from is what you voted on. I think people misinterpret it, and I think there are a lot of people that are against it. That's settle that one. Anyways, I have a question about money's being spent for Fairview Terrace, gates, water and sewer lines, and then you're talking, is it Christian Street was the other one? We got $600,000 or $800,000 going towards that from the ARPA money?
ARPA?
Yeah.
ARPA,
well,
we have the water main up on Gate Street.
Okay, well,
that's one of the 4 big public works projects that are in there.
I just sold my business in White River, so I don't have town water and town sewer anymore. In my other properties, I have my own septic and wells, which I have to pay for. Water and sewers bills our department is funded by an enterprise fund. Now you're using this ARPA money to supplement somebody else's water and sewer bill, but you're not helping me who has a septic system or a well. You're not doing it for everybody. So why, if there's an enterprise fund raising money, years ago, Christie had to have some work done. They raised the rates to pay for the work. And that's where that money should be coming from, to pay for those items. I truly believe that way. The ARPA money should be helping to relieve our taxes and take care of other items that benefit everybody, not just the users.
Any of our 4 candidates wish to speak to that comment? Yes, Mr. Collins.
So I can't speak a great deal about the water and sewer. I will say this, that the select board decided the acting town manager did a great job of presenting a budget to us that was nearly level funded, or if not level funded. But when it came to the select board, there was all these other fees, there were all these other things that were added into it, which drove up the tax rate. So one of the things that was put in there is, she was, correct me if I'm wrong, Gail, but $25,000 towards engineering on the different funds. Yeah, recommendation was $25,000. And the select board said, let's give $75,000. Okay, well, that's $75,000 towards engineering cost. But again, that's not coming into the general fund because it's enterprise funds, but that's user fees. So it drives up the user fees. I'm not on town water and sewer, okay, but those of you that are, you have to pay higher user fees for engineering studies that the board wanted, that the acting town manager didn't even think we needed. So why put another $50,000 in there? That's a question there. Yeah, so it's troubling like that. We need to fix Gate Street, Fairview Terrace. When we lose a road, any communities lose roads, they don't come back again. And that is important to get that structure fixed. I did not vote in favor of this budget because the monies that we should have been using on infrastructure projects, I think went towards needs that are not needs and wants. That's my position.
Our other 4 candidates, so the question was using ARPA money into an enterprise fund instead of the general fund. Anybody want to speak to that question?
Well, I'll just speak about the ARPA funding for the Department of Public Works and why those were chosen. Those were 4 projects that were identified as high priority, that were shovel-ready, that involved both aging infrastructure and a risk to public safety. So that's why those were chosen. And like I mentioned, by funding those 4 through ARPA, we were able to increase the paving budget from $500,000 to $775,000. I don't have, town water either. But, I think this is something, and we can get you the stats of how many lots that serves, how many people would be affected if there was a catastrophic water main failure. So, I think that's important. As for ARPA, this is once in a lifetime money. If we use it 1 year to make sure our taxes don't go up at all, next year, look, we got projects that are languishing, investments that aren't being made. The real point of the money, I think, is to fund some long-term investment, and I think we've done a good job with how we've done it, and that's all I've got on that one.
Other candidates on that? Okay, great. Move on. Our next question right here.
So I have a comment about parking, but I have a question too. My comment is perhaps the planning department should think very carefully about giving variances to developers. And it is not realistic to say that studio apartment renters will only have 1 car, if any, So anyway, so I was taken by your comment, Janelle, about the public safety and the schools. So Kevin, this is directed to you. So I don't know how many of you remember Columbine and what that felt like when we watched all those kids get killed by other kids, and our communities came together and had conversations. Towns got together and had meetings in auditoriums where they were terrified for the safety of their children and the staff who work in schools. That has, we are all numb to shootings and killings in communities, and especially schools. This $50,000 study, personally, I think the school, I'm hoping the school is addressing safety. I think you are. You know, I see the signs where you can't enter the school at certain times. But, and I hear about all of the, kids being, coming to school with significant mental health issues, and there are safety issues. I also live on Hanover Street, which was a throughway for people coming to the Haven, and I'm a big supporter of the Haven, but our street was not safe pre-COVID when we had a lot of people walking around. We have school kids going by our house every single day. We had people smoking pot, doing drugs, being drunk at the end of the street, and the school board didn't seem to be concerned about adding a low barrier shelter and bringing in, it is not like it's not them and us, it's just not, it's location. But so that's part of it, but what is the school actively doing to keep our children and staff safe? And is that part of that $50,000 safety study?
Great, thank you for the question. Yes, Coach, go ahead.
It isn't part of the safety study. After Columbine and other events that occurred in schools, we met as a school community and put together a safety team at the school. That team meets regularly, and it's comprised of our police department, our fire department, as well as community health providers and school administrators. That regular meeting speaks to those issues. Now, as we hear more from specific parents and or community members, the response has been to go directly to fixing the problem. Our superintendent has activated patrols in the interim movement of student times where administrators are out with radios, and that has been an active deterrent over time. And those are within, our purview, and also looking at not requesting additional public safety support to do those active patrols. Because if it's students related, it's still our watch and still our responsibility. And that's what we do. We invite people to come to the board and share their questions and concerns. And when they do, we respond in kind. And part of our process is, depending on the nature of the question, we will ask the superintendent to provide the board with an active report. And that's how we respond to those issues.
Great, thanks, Coach. Mr. Heavisides, would you like to comment on this at all? Doug, go.
Doug, he's asking you a question.
Do you wish to comment on the question about about security and safety at the school?
The only comment I can make is the fact that when we constructed the Wilder Grammar School, that was taken into consideration. And it's, you would have to do something extraordinary in order to get in there, unless you're authorized.
Okay, thanks. I do have a question from the cameraman who is unable to queue up at the microphone, so come on down and tell us your name and where you live and ask away.
Hello, Chico Eastridge. I'm a Hartford resident. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'll try to put a spin on the parking meters question. I think there's a carrot and a stick approach to parking, and this is a stick approach, and I have to drive downtown pretty much every day, get video equipment and stuff and put it in my van. And so on a day-to-day basis, I probably will be upset about parking meters, but I think in general, I'm not against them because you can't just fill up those spots with cars all day. If you were to think about it as real estate that you were renting, you would pay a decent amount for that amount of space. But I think we do also need to increase things like public transit, zone for housing, for people to actually live downtown, because the Upper Valley, and this is an Upper Valley-wide problem, it's not just Hartford, is that you can't realistically live without a car, or if you do, you kind of end up being a second-class citizen. And so I think we need to move towards systems that can reduce the need for parking. And so I guess that's my question. What can we do to reduce the need for parking? Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chico. Response from any of our four candidates on the board about that? Yes, Mr. Collins.
Thanks, Chico. Advanced Transit has a great system in the downtown area, but it's only, I shouldn't use the word but. I've been told not to use the word but. And that needs to be expanded upon to different areas as well, and need to have more frequency. I live in Quechee, and Advanced Transit doesn't come out to me. If we're going to structure our transportation needs around just one central location, it's got to be better served by the buses. And if that means that perhaps we need to do off-site parking and bus people into the downtown area. Advance, like I say, it's a great resource to have in the town of Hartford. It'd be awesome if we could expand it, and I'm not sure what the key to expansion is. Maybe it's having user fees, but it's one of the ways we could grow our transportation needs in the Upper Valley. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next question, sir.
Anybody else? No. Jeff Arnold, the Wilder. I have a couple questions for the school board members or candidates. We've, like I said earlier, the budget for the schools have gone up 14 million over the last 10 years. And what's happened is we're not getting the kind of results that you would expect from those increases. Here in the report, it shows that our scores in reading was 514, whereas in the rest of the state it was 558. And in math, our score was 503 of our students, where the rest of the state was 537. Also, only about 47% of the kids have gone on to college. So with this big investment in our schools, why aren't we getting the results? I'm asking the two candidates.
Thanks, Jeff. Doug, do you want to take a first crack at this? Question from Jeff is, with the increase in the school spending, why aren't we seeing higher score performance and college admissions?
I really don't have an answer. I've just begun to get involved, and so I don't want to speak out of turn when I don't really know the facts.
Very good. Coach, you want to take a crack at it?
When we look at where our kids go at the end of the day, not all of them go off to college. We have students that go into the military. We have students that go into the trades. it's very difficult to track that. We have one of the best tech centers in the state, and it is constantly fully enrolled, if not over-enrolled in some of our programs. And so I guess my response to that will be that we will request, because we can, if I make it back again, that we do a better job with that data on where our kids are going. You know, and it's a difficult tracking piece. You know, I think any of us that have been involved in different organizations, be it schools or what have you, when you get that report from the organization, do you always fill it out? Maybe, sometimes. So, I mean, how do we track where our kids are? I'm pretty proud of what we've done as far as what a Hartford graduate looks like. You know, when, you know, I travel around the state, you know, a lot, and I see our kids. A new hire at Vermont Legal Aid. You know, one of our graduates is a state legislator. Another one of our graduates is a state senator. You know, I mean, hey, we do okay, you know? You know, my daughter just took a job, and at the end of the interview, they said to her in Chicago, what do you want? So those are the results that are hard to quantify, but I understand what, you know, Jeff is speaking to directly as far as where our kids are going. The piece of the technical results, you know, I'd like, if I could, just ask Tom to share a very quick response to those numbers, because there is a reason for them, and he has shared it with us before as the board, if it's okay.
Tom, looks like the seat's heating up for you.
Oh, that's all right. But Chuck, are we gonna, I thought we were focusing on candidate stuff.
You are.
Yeah, that was a question to school candidates.
I'll be very quick, but one of the things that has changed with tracking graduates is that we're not expecting every kid to go on to a four-year school. A lot of kids are taking a gap year, they're doing different things. When I went to school, that was the way we tracked how kids were successful or how high schools were successful. How many went on to four-year schools? A lot of my college mates dropped out, never finished school, took 8 years, didn't find a good job. Kids are smarter nowadays. They're doing more productive things. We're working harder to figure out what they're interested in and what they want to do for a career. So a lot of kids are taking time off to figure out what they really want to do. They're getting into the jobs, very, very successful tradesmen, tradespeople. So we need to find a different measurement for how we're gauging the success of high school. I think that's the incorrect measure. Figure out how many kids go on to a four-year school is the measure of how successful our high school kids are. So that's what we're going to look at.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, a quick note on process here. We, in theory, have an agenda going until 10 p.m. We sort of historically continue this meeting until about half of the audience has voted with their feet and walked out. I will note we started with a little over 100 people, and we still have more than 50, so we're still meeting our informal goals here. So we'll continue the meeting. I'm especially interested in hearing from anybody who hasn't had a chance yet to ask a question or wants to ask a question on a topic we haven't heard. So if you might be one of those people, do feel free to come down to the microphone.
Chuck.
Otherwise, I'll continue ahead with Mr. Arnold. Follow up, Jeff.
Yeah, so they tried to address one aspect of that question. It was a two-part question. SAT scores were not addressed at all by either of the two board members. And
okay, follow up,
Coach Christie has been on the board since who knows when, 2010, I think. And so we're still getting mediocre scores and scores way below the rest of the state.
Thanks, Jeff.
So can you explain?
Kevin, another crack at scores?
My answer, again, to those scores is the outcome piece, Jeff. I think we're doing better than the data says. And I mean, that's
all we have to
question.
go by is data.
Hey, well.
Jeff, okay, thanks for the question,
No,
Jeff, that'd be great.
I understand, and I appreciate your question, but we can support that as well.
Okay.
And we'll have that for Saturday. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Coach. Yes? Can I add something to this? As a school board presenter, absolutely.
I would have to agree with Coach, and I mean, a number of institutions at the college level are beginning not to even require the SAT. So it's, again, a new measurement standard, and not everyone should go to college. I have 4 kids. All 4 went to college. My oldest shouldn't have, because he didn't graduate. It wasn't a fit for him. So we need to do and recognize college is not for everybody, especially at the expense. And we have hired interventionists for reading, so we have taken steps to correct this.
Thank you. Okay, yes, next question.
We all are familiar with Zillow. And this comment and question is going to be directed at the school board. There's a rating system for rating communities' schools that is commonly a part of Zillow. And most people today who are shopping for real estate or looking to move to a community go to the bottom part of Zillow where the great schools' ratings are illustrated. Hartford schools, the middle school is rated at 3 out of 10, substandard. The Dothan Brook School is 6 out of 10. The high school is 5 out of 10. I think the highest rated school in our district is the White River Elementary School at a 7. Interestingly, this sort of information has an impact on the real estate values in a community and the desirability of a community by people who are looking to come here. I'd like to know what you're going to do to raise these scores and some of the scores that Jeff talked about, because I think it has a direct and dramatic impact on the value of property in our town.
Great, thanks, Ken. We'll start with our 2 candidates. Either of you wish to speak to that? Coach, take it away. If the microphone will allow it.
Yeah.
There you go.
As far as, let's go back to pre-COVID. I mean, the last 2 years have been really dramatic as far as education goes and working with our children. Prior to that time, we were in the process of initiating a new curriculum structure. We know that the elementary schools are primary grades. They call them that for a reason. If we don't get a good start there, all bets are off. So a lot of intention has been placed on working with that grade level. Our superintendent has realigned his administrative team and has created a dual structure for curriculum support within that team. And one of our most recent hires within the last year is Dr. Robinson, who is our elementary specialist. And this takes time, to correct. And we have to do it with intention, and we are, looking at those areas.
Thanks, Coach. Doug, do you wish to speak to that? Or...
COVID has done many things to many people. And this is just an example that times are changing, and we have a great school, as far as I'm concerned, we have a great school system. That's not to say that it can't be better. And we just have to look at different reports and make changes.
Chuck, I'd like to weigh in on this one if I could.
Okay, sure. Let me just remind the audience that if people don't come to the microphone, then I will end the meeting. So that may be what your intention is, which is perfectly fine. But if you do have a question, do come forward. So, yep, Lannie.
And it's, I'm not on the school board, obviously, but this is one of those areas where I think it's pivotal for the school board and the select board, who is town government, to come together to be able to look at what we can do for a plan for excellence in our schools and also within our town. We have a fractured relationship now with the schools, and we need to get that relationship established again and work collaboratively along with the citizens to find out what is needed in order to excel both our students and our communities. And those are the relationships that are key to the future of Hartford. And that's one thing I'd love to see take place. Thank you, Chuck.
Great. Any other comments from our candidates on stage? Okay, yes, next question.
Hello, Kim Souza, Hartford. I think, like Rocket, I also have been biting my tongue wanting to respond and elaborate on a lot of the questions that have been asked. So I'm just going to throw it out there that I'm happy to continue these conversations with anyone off this platform.
By the way, Kim, you should just let us know you are a select board member.
I am a member of the Hartford Select Board currently. My question is for Patrick Danaher. I am curious to know, in your opening remarks, you mentioned things about wanting to make change and shift balance, and I'm just curious if you could elaborate and give some examples of some of the things that you have in mind for that.
Well, thanks for the question. Well, I think the board doesn't make up, it's out of balance, and it doesn't make up all of a good cross-section of the town of Hartford.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, take my generation. I'm an older fellow and a longtime resident. I don't think it represents my generation or longtime residents.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Mike, you want to speak to that since you're also a candidate for that seat? Or you also feel free to pass.
I was commenting on his specific.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay, great. Is there anybody else in the audience that has a question or a comment?
Could that go down through the line, please?
I'll-
All four, all of them answer.
Okay. We have a request from the audience. If the 4 candidates for select board, the other 3 would just kind of wish to speak to, I think, Kim's general question of, I guess, in particular, well, it's a little bit hard to frame this in a lightning round. Kim, do you want to reframe it for the 4?
How about maybe what kinds of things could you think of would bring an improvement to the balance of the board?
Okay, great. Yes.
Start.
Why don't we start with Mike next, since you're in the same seat?
All I'd say is, we are elected, so if you want to change the balance of the board, I'd encourage everyone to vote and vote for the person you think would do the best job. Right now, we've got, I guess, younger generations or people think maybe the balance is off. They can remedy that next Tuesday.
Yes, Lannie.
As I stated before, the select board as it stands right now is extremely focused on equity, diversion, majority board is focused on DEI training and DEI within the community, diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board, and that's great. We are focused on making sure that the community is is feeling like they can come to us with things. But I believe that it's still lacking within the select board of that diversity. When you have everyone on the select board or the majority of the people in the select board that all are leaning left of center, that does not give a true representation of what the needs are of the community. And it seems like we slowly tilting to left of center, and if we want true diversity and inclusion within the town of Hartford on our boards and committees, we need to have people that balance that board that have differing opinions. And that's one of the perspectives that I bring to the board, is that I look at things through a different lens. I am physically conservative, but I am moderate when it comes to social things. And I'm more than open to listening and hearing, and my thoughts may change when I hear from conservatives and other people within the community. And I welcome that ability to do that, because you can only learn and grow as a person and as a board member by having that. But you have to have a foundation that you come from. And I'll be honest, I don't come from the same foundation as the rest of my members, or the majority of the members on the select board, and that's good for the community.
Thanks, Lannie. Janelle, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. So just to be clear, the question is, like, how am I going to change things, or what do I want to change?
Going on, Patrick used the phrase balance, improve the balance on the board. I was just looking for ways that candidates could imagine improving the board.
By electing me.
All right, Janelle, you have the floor. So yeah, question about just sort of ways to consider and talk about the balance on the board and improvements to the board that you could see making.
Sure. So I just, like was stated, I feel like people elect the people that they think will work for them and that they think will do the best job for them. All of these people are elected. We all come up here and we, share our piece, and it's decided by the voters who they think will best represent them.
Great, thanks. Yeah. A little bit of a nebulous question. Sorry the way that unfolded. Yeah. Yes, question.
Elise Holzberg in Queechee, and I just wanted to bring us back to the question of parking meters. So this is really for Lannie and for Michael Holt. I understand you voted for or voted against parking meters, and that once the budget is approved, you're going to stand by the budget, and I think that's honorable. At the same time, I'm hearing Lannie say, well, we're using Hanover as our guide, and we believe that once we have the meters, the money will come. I think it's important to realize that Hanover had parking meters and has had parking meters for a long time. So the one thing that you really haven't answered for me and perhaps for other people is, once we have the parking meters, what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with hiring staff? How are we going to manage that flow of money that's coming in terms of enforcement, in terms of other things that come along with having a parking meter? A parking meter may bring money into our community. At the same time, the management and the administration of those parking meters is going to cost us a lot of money. And so I'm looking for Lannie and Mike, if you can address that. Thank you.
Every study that's been brought to us for parking meters, has indicated that parking meters will pay for themselves in terms of we'll get a return on investment on the parking meters. They'll also pay for a parking attendant as well as the maintenance fees. Newer parking meters are set up so much better than the old system of having to put a coin in and go around and collect it. Newer parking meters that presented to us, and the planning director could answer it better than I could, is that everything's electronic nowadays. So you don't have to worry about going around and collecting funds. We're still going to have an enforcement officer that makes sure that it's enforced, but everything that's been presented to the board in terms of parking meters indicates that this will be a self-sustaining, viable thing to take care of parking. And I know it does not address every single question that's out there, but I'm not sure how much more I can, if you have a specific.
So I think you're answering my question. At the same time, what's the time frame? Is it that you're telling us that once the parking meter is magically planted, then we're going to see that money rolling in? How long does it take from the time the parking meter is placed to we recoup and we're able to use those dollars to then pay for the staff? So it sounds like to me we're looking at going with one of the companies that manages parking meters. Is that correct?
We would manage the parking meters, I believe. I'm not the
Yeah, we're getting,
answer on this.
we're getting a little bit into the weeds here. I don't know if anybody from staff wants to
Yeah.
speak to the logistics of how this works?
Marie, you want to answer this, or Gail? I'm not the expert on parking.
That's okay.
Correct, and so I just want to make sure that we're not losing sight. The ARPA funding for the parking meters has already been approved, and I understand and appreciate all the questions about how it's going to be managed, but this is candidates to be speaking, so if you want to address it after this finishes, I certainly could have a staff member come up and
I
speak
guess
to it
I'm
right
really looking
now.
at the budget for this.
Right, I think what Gail is saying, so this money has already been approved. It's not in the budget that we'll
Okay.
be voting on.
Thank you.
Your taxes will not be paying for parking meters.
Okay. Okay, we are getting close to 10 o'clock. Again,
No
happy to
taxes.
recognize anybody who we haven't heard from yet. Why don't we go for you for the last question?
Okay, parking meters. When I go into town, will, after the parking meters are installed and everyone's hired and it's all, working, am I going to be able to find a place to park without driving around 4 times, polluting the air, using my gas, and not contributing very, very sensibly to climate change? Will I have a place?
I am sure that all 4 of our candidates will happily
Hey, Alice,
promise free parking for all residents.
If you have a crystal ball, I would love to have it. And I would love to have that crystal ball, because there's no way to answer that question, really. I would hope that it would be available to you.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to Budget and Candidates Night. That'll conclude this evening's meeting. We look forward to getting together again on Saturday at 10 o'clock in the gymnasium, or 9 o'clock, coffee with committees.